I'm talking about the difference between hunting and farming. Hunting is like the hunter goes out into the forest and shoots a deer and is like, we got dinner tonight. The farmer works over the course of the year cultivating the land and planting seeds when the time is right. A harvest can be extremely plentiful if you do it right. A lot of people are like, well, I don't need to worry about, anything related to marketing, but now all of a sudden I'm 1 week from going live on Kickstarter. So now I'm going to spam every Facebook group I get with the same copy pasted, same image. I'm just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's not what you want to do at all. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I'm your host, Andrew Lowen, and I'm joined, as almost always, by Sean. And today, we're going to talk about the concept of drivers and catchers. This is something that we referenced a couple of times in a few recent episodes, but we haven't really touched on this in a really long time. I think the concept is super important, especially in today's day and age, like even more important in 2026 than it was in 2016, far more important. And as the years go on, it just seems like it becomes more and more relevant to know, number one, know the difference between a marketing campaign that drives interest and a marketing campaign that catches the result of said interest. Because a lot of the time there are these gaps in between. Like, you as a creator won't necessarily see what is driving your interest. You will see, generally, if you're tracking, what's capturing the interest. But a lot of the time, people will just sit there saying, oh, I don't know, my game is making sales. I guess it's because, God loves me. It's like, well, yeah, but you probably should figure out like how those people are finding your product, let's just not leave it up to a feeling. And so that's what the podcast episode is about. So there are a lot of little elements to consider. We've got, like, I've been testing ChatGPT for ads, and they have their ad system that has been recently released. And so I have thoughts on that, but nothing that is like conclusive. But I figure since, I literally got to try them out on the very first day that they were released. And so I can share my initial impressions after about 2 weeks of running ads.
And how much ad spend have you kind of dumped in?
So $25 a day. Let me see. The total amount of ad spend that I have spent thus far is $167.79. I've had just over 10,000 impressions. So that's kind of where we're at.
And then in terms of how those ad impressions work, does it kind of naturally inject itself into queries that people ask relevant to, or is it, if someone was to say anything about board games, you just have like a slot on the top of the page? Like how exactly does it kind of work in terms of displaying the ad?
So they have ad segments that are input, but it's not like natural text. It's actually, it says the word ad, it says your company's name, and you have like a little logo. You've got an image that you can use. You've got a headline that you can use, as well as a short description. And I want to say the headline is maximum 50 characters. And I want to say also that if you want your headline to show in all placements, mobile and desktop, it should be closer to 30 characters long. And then your description is only a maximum of 100 characters long. That includes spaces. And so it's really quite short. There's only one, and also the copy maybe, cut, truncated in some placements, typically mobile. So I can share, in our Crowdfunding Nerds community what it looks like, but generally you're going to want to use a very simple image. So I'm using like our box graph, or, just like our box with like a textured background, so that everybody knows that sees the ad. This is an actual board game. My camera seems all weird. So this is a board game, and if I were to use an image that had a lot of complicated things going on, then the ad is going to show in a really small manner, so you won't really be able to make out those details. So you can.
So if someone was to like type in a prompt like recommend 10 board games, Deliverance wouldn't pop up in their 10 recommendations, or is it more so that Deliverance will pop up at the bottom or top of the page, and it might not be in those like top 10 recommendations? Is that how it kind of works?
Well, so that's actually where it gets interesting, because a lot of the phrases that I'm using, I may very well be popping up organically already. So that's one thing that we'll talk about later. But in general, I am not familiar with exactly how the ads are delivered, because I've never seen an ad myself. Even though I've used ChatGPT on the regular, I have not seen an ad yet. So I know that they're being being shared in very limited, like probably for testing purposes. They're being, only some people may have access to them or something like that. But it's always contextual, which is what I really like. So the thing I like the best about it is that there's context. When I'm looking for, I'm looking for a board game with RPG elements that I haven't played before, that has this, that, and the other, like character progression. It's like themed around angels and blah, blah. That is probably immediately going to trigger Deliverance being shared organically. But if, and so, if it's more generic, we'll say, then it's more likely that I will, that'll have the potential to show up. So like so you have an ad group. So you have a campaign, an ad group, and ads. The campaign is just, general guidelines for how you want to set things up. The ad group is where you get your specific targeting in. And what ChatGPT does is they use context hints. So you do your ad group name, you set your maximum bid that you're willing to bid, and you give context hints, which are optional, because ChatGPT is an AI. They're going to use what they find on the website and other things like that to try to match searches. But
do they have some type of tracking or pixel that you can install on your website to track conversions?
Yes, they do. However, that is not something that I'm able to test properly. So I have no listed conversions, because conversions are on Hive Interactive. So for those on YouTube, I'm actually sharing my screen right now, and you have lots of different events that you can set for your campaign. You can have an order created, a lead created, etc. So you've got a lot of different options. And then the data source is like the ChatGPT Pixel. So, but because we're marketing to Hive, that's where our conversions are.
So you're just using referral codes.
Correct. Yeah. So we're using referral codes. But I, last I checked, I hadn't received any referral conversions.
Mm-hmm.
But the last time I checked was last week. So I can check again, like during our podcast, and see, has it driven any sales? But the main thing for me is to see, what are these 110 clicks doing? So I've had 110 clicks, 1.05 click-through rate overall. I started like last week, and you can see I spent like almost half the budget last week. The average cost per click was $2.21, because I listed, they recommend that your bid is at least $3 average. It's like, that just seems pretty expensive. Like per click, $3 per click is like quite a lot. So I'm like, okay, let's just see, we'll go for it. It's $25 a day. Let's just see for a test what the actual cost per click is with their recommended budget. Of course, it's really close to, $2.21 per click was really expensive. So I'm like, hey, forget that, and I think I went to like $1, and then I eventually went up, because there weren't that many impressions. It went up to $1.30, which is where I'm at now. And the average cost per click is $1.23. My click-through rate is actually a little bit higher. My average CPM dropped by $7. And so it seems like between, maybe we'll say like $1 to $1.50 a click is what you're looking for in order to get a decent click-through rate, a decent number of impressions. It could go down after people maybe, I don't know if more people will start or if they're going to serve ads to more people or whatever, but I do expect the average cost per click to drop, over time, but there's really not a lot that you can do. So the actual ad, so you can see it's not really large or anything, but I wonder, so it goes to our, Play Deliverance homepage. But you can see the number one angelic warfare board game is what we call it. So, and by the way, you can see like it shows fine on the preview down here, the number one angelic warfare board game. But if you were to like mouse over, there you go. This is probably more what it'll look like on mobile. It says the number one angelic warfare board. So I probably need to remove the word "the" in order to make this.
Yes,
good.
yeah, and the number one, even
Right.
so, just like angelic warfare, and then maybe even board game in the description.
Yeah. So let's duplicate the ad and just say,
Short copy or something.
Yeah, short copy. Just short ad, number one. And then like number one angelic warfare board game.
I would just say angelic warfare, and then board game in the description, the number one board game or something of that effect. I think keeping that title as short as possible might be worth testing.
Yeah. I think this number one here is enough. It's because it's 29 characters. I expect now it's going to show on all placements. And I think that number one is going to add value. And then it says award-winning 1 to 5 player co-op Christian dungeon crawler, play as angels, level up, and fight evil. So it was just what I had at the time, And so this is going to playdeliverance.com. It's the pre-order. People can find the pre-order link, but this is meant to drive interest. So there we go. So we'll just create that. We can see what happens. It's a tiny little change, but I'm curious as to if it makes a difference. So it should be in the same ad group. So I'll show you guys the ad groups right now. The context is, so my maximum bid that I'm willing to bid here is $1.30. Ad group name is whatever I want to call it. But the context hints are very interesting. So describe the conversations, topics, or keywords where your products or services may be relevant. These hints guide matching but aren't exact match targeting rules. That means if somebody Googles Christian board games, I can show up with a Google ad by typing little brackets around, like this. It's like when somebody searches exactly
an exact
this,
match. Yeah.
Right. But there's no like exact match in that way. This is a context hint. So Christian board games, faith-based board games in general, which is probably even unnecessary. Christian games, faith-based games, Christian RPG, tabletop game, RPG board game. I'll say when I added RPG, my from what I gathered, my click-through rate went up and my cost per click went down. So the interests I think do matter, but I'm not sure exactly how it plays because everything's a big black box. So especially without a pixel, because I just added it there. So we're definitely gonna add the pixel and get tracking implemented, but I just wanted to get something going, and so that's kind of where it is. So it's partially serving because some ads are under review. So there's our short ad number one. If I just turn ad number one off, then the short ad.
It seems very intuitive. If you're familiar with meta ads, it seems almost identical in terms of its layout and how it kind of operates. So that's clever. I mean, if I was developing an ad platform, I would also mimic the most popular ad platform out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Meta is making so much money from ads that it's just insane, right? And they've been able to lose like billions of dollars on stupid things like the metaverse, really stupid projects. I can't overemphasize how dumb that idea was, and how much of a, I don't know, it's just crazy. In fact, I even think if Mark Zuckerberg went out at Meta and someone else came in, Meta would probably be so much more profitable, because it's like a cash cow. It's like the main place for ads is running on Meta, especially for crowdfunding and whatnot.
Well, when did World of Warcraft get at its worst? It was when it was at its most popular, right? It was Cataclysm is when it had the most subscribers, and that's when it got. So I think it gets to a position where people get so successful that no matter what they produce, they're making money, and I think they stop caring. So I think that's kind of what happened to a lot of these big companies.
That's crazy. So I guess, how does this ChatGPT, how can we relate this to our topic at hand? Drivers versus catchers. Obviously, you guys have seen that I didn't put in the conversion tracking code, but which I will. But it drives interest where people don't know the product's name, and they want to play something like that. That is, ChatGPT is a way that people can connect with something new. Conventions are another way that people connect with new things all the time, where you have a booth, somebody walks by your booth, looks at it, and gets delighted and walks right in and says, teach me about this. That's kind of what they're doing on ChatGPT. So where else do they do that? It's really like the general concept is if you put a billboard in a small town, you want to put that billboard in the busiest lane or the busiest area of the town. So the ideal place would be the freeway or the main road of the town. If it could be the same exact billboard, but if you put that billboard in a rural place in the town, very few people will see it, and therefore very few people will, your CPM will be very high. Your cost per 1,000 impressions, there might not be 1,000 people in that area of the town all year, So in the same way, we want to look at the quantity of foot traffic or the quantity of web traffic that a particular place receives. And so you've got like the big ones, which are Google and ChatGPT. Google, by the way, is about 10 times larger than ChatGPT. So whereas Google will get like 3 billion searches a day, ChatGPT will get like maybe 250,000 searches or 250 million searches a day, which is still quite large, but maybe it's like 150 million actually. So Google could be like 20 times larger. And so the comparison, there's really no comparison between the two. Google dominates as far as the overall traffic, but Meta is another huge one. Facebook in particular. So people use Instagram. A lot of people use TikTok, but people interact with ads on Meta. Like it's very, very commonly understood, very popular. Meta does a really good job serving you ads for things that you actually like. Another really big one is Amazon. Amazon is a huge beast on its own. But that people actually look to discover products. They'll look for, board games for 12-year-olds or, gift ideas for 12-year-olds, stuff like that. A lot of people searching for things on Amazon. And there are many more areas that people travel. They travel in groups of friends. They frequent websites to read news and get the latest on board game nerd stuff. I mean, Kickstarter and GameFound themselves are drivers, because people go there to see what has launched recently. They look at YouTube as a huge source for driving interest because people will follow, their favorite channels, or they'll Google, what games have launched, or they'll search on YouTube what games have launched recently, or they'll look at whatever their favorite creator has been playing and talking about. So he could be a huge driver. So a lot of different options, I guess. And so maybe step one is just to understand what a driver is, and what it is not. So what do people like? I'll ask you, Sean. What do people do that they think drives interest that doesn't?
Well, maybe even before we kind of define those things, I think we have to kind of go back to like what makes ad campaigns profitable, because the whole idea of drivers is sort of trusting the fact that you might not, like as you said, you haven't installed this pixel, so you can't track the results, but you trust that it's still driving interest. So I think in terms of the kind of broad picture is that you're basically investing a certain amount of money and trusting that it's going to bring back a certain return, even if you can't make a one-for-one connection with some of those links. An example of this would be influencers. They drive interest because if you pay an influencer, you're probably not going to get direct sales from that, where someone's going to look at an influencer and then purchase something. But when someone searches your game review, that influencer will likely come up. It's going to influence or drive interest or improve the kind of the likelihood of them making a purchase later on in the kind of system of getting them to actually finally make a purchase. Mm-hmm. And I think these things are important because people want shortcuts. They want, board games, tabletop games, they're big investments, both in money, but also time. You don't want to table a game, play it for 3 hours, learn the rules to find out the game isn't that good. So people want shortcuts where they go to an influencer or a reviewer or they read a blog and someone has done all that and they've then given their honest feedback and say, okay, well, I will, in light of this, I will, invest my time and money into that. So I think those are the key things in the tabletop industry that really are big drivers where you're not going to see a great return on investment from that. But it's one of these, what we call hygiene factors, having at least some type of content creator cover your game, give some feedback. So I think that's the idea of drivers, in that they aren't necessarily going to make direct sales, but they're certainly helping or assisting in bringing in those sales.
Right. Yeah, that's a huge deal because so the marketing acronym is AIDA. It's kind of the customer decision cycle, and it's abbreviated AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. And so attention would be the billboard. Like, look at me. I'm a thing that you didn't ask for, but I'm telling you about this. Interest is when I see something or hear about something and I want to collect more information. That's where I'm at. I'm seeking information. Desire is when I've sought enough information that I've decided to buy something, but I need to look for like the best price, or I need to look for like what version of the thing do I want, and do I really want this thing now that my interest has been piqued? I'm going to go on a deep dive. Like for Deliverance, I heard somebody like Alex Radcliffe talking about it. It seems really interesting, or Jeremy Howard, whatever. Now I'm like going to go down a rabbit hole of Deliverance content to see if I'm going to look at the website. I'm going to look at everything to see if I want to buy this. And then the final is action. I'm going to actually buy it for maybe the best price, or I've decided on what I want and I'm purchasing the product. And there's a certain time that it needs, that your customers will take to do those things. And so a lot of the time, like for example, the ChatGPT ads that I have running, I didn't set those up. Like right now, we don't actually have a product for purchase. So everything is a pre-order. And as far as I can tell, like it's not made a meaningful dent in our sales or anything. I don't have any sales recorded to the referral link. So the direct referral link is, which actually we're not using at the moment, but because, oh, by the way, the reason that we weren't using the direct referral link is because ChatGPT was like, we need to make sure this ad runs for a while before you're allowed to change your URL. So I have the referral link, but I haven't been able to put it into the ad. So real quick, while I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste that referral link into the ad. So anyway, the decision, like that cycle, that customer decision cycle could be a couple of weeks. So when they hear about your game, they see an ad on Facebook. That's attention. They might click on the ad because it seems interesting. They gather information enough to say either I'm interested in this or I'm not interested in this. And a really good landing page is such a key in providing information. So a lot of people are just going to try to sell right away with the landing page, like, but our landing pages provide information. That's one of the main goals of like the Crowdfunding Nerds virtuous cycle system, is to get the user to digest as much information as possible, so that the more information that you absorb about something, the more interested you're going to be, and oftentimes the quicker you'll foster a desire in somebody to take action, right? So when the interest is like, hey, get your VIP for $1, you want to, you're creating an immediate desire in that person to get the best deal, but they don't even know what they're buying yet. They need to learn about the product and that kind of thing. And so the best deal is not really what sells people at this stage. It's getting the right information and saying, is this game right for me and my game group, or whatever, the product happens to be. And only then will you create a desire. And the problem I find with many, like the early bird style or the VIP system, is that when you've created a desire, you don't need to convince somebody by giving them like $1 off or a free thing. Like, they will act with intelligence. They're going to say, I'm not an idiot. Like, I already want this thing. So sure, I'll take 20% off for your early bird special. Like, of course I will. But they would have also paid full price because they were really interested and excited about it. The VIP thing is even worse in many ways. We've talked about this in the past, where sure, I'll take the free 9-card expansion that costs $5 for everyone else that finds this later. But then everyone else that finds it later is like, what, am I being penalized now for, my desire happening after you launched? And I don't get advantage because I didn't find it a day earlier for the VIP or a month earlier for the VIP deal. So generally we find those things to be detestable. But the customer will go through a period of time where they learn about your product to when, they first see your product and they learn about it to when they buy it. And the question is, what are they doing in that time when they first heard about it, between when they first heard about it to when they actually buy it? What activity do they generate? And that's part of what we want to talk about, because that is really those things are drivers, and catchers would be straight up things that result in money being generated by sales. But there's also kind of a third thing that I think is really important, and that's that maybe representative of the in-between time after you've captured their attention and you've got their interest and they're seeking information. Where do they go and what do they do to gather information? Part of that, you're going to be able to maybe lead them on a journey with, if they sign up for an email, you're going to give them a welcome email that has information in it and links in it. You're going to maybe be able to redirect them to like your Kickstarter or GameFound landing page so that they can get more information and follow and whatever. But if the only purpose is to get them to hit the follow button, you're really missing a lot of this, like what is good about this process. You want to give them places they can go to get more information, or at least let them know when more information will be available and where to find it. Right. So that in between, I think there's something else that, I don't know, we can call it like it's related to engagement, right? Like, how can we engage people that are interested in information about our specific product? And there are some obvious answers and maybe some that people aren't really thinking about. But what do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I think the idea of catchers and drivers is also dependent on the platform which people are on. The people have different intentions and on different things. So, for example, the purchase intention is much higher on Google when someone's searching for something, or on Amazon when there's essentially a search engine as well, than it is on something like maybe YouTube, where they are watching videos maybe to kind of see the latest news or the latest trends or something, or even on Facebook or Instagram, where people might just be doom scrolling or trying to see what their local hobby groups are talking about. So I think there's certain platforms which are better for those different initiatives. So, for example, driving, Meta is really good at driving interest in a topic. Great for email capture campaigns. Can be much harder for sales as a result. So if you're just going cold, someone sees your ad for the first time, then making a purchase, that's much harder to do on something like Meta, particularly if you've got a high ticket item. And when I say anything around like $100+, that might work for small games. Like if you had like a small card game, that's like $20 with free shipping, then yeah, that could sell quite well on Meta. But when you're talking about high ticket items, so I think knowing that when you are thinking of drivers in particular, something like Board Game Geek and Meta, these are good places for that type of and YouTube as well with influencers. When it comes to actually capturing, that's where you want things like retargeting, maybe on those platforms, or particularly Meta. And then like Google searches, this one actually does. We have a client and we make the majority of our sales on Google from just running ads targeting their publishing brand, their name. So when anyone types in their name, we're the first result and we get. So that's a catcher. We know that they've obviously heard about the brand somewhere else. And when they go to Google search it, we want to make sure that we're the first result and it's going to the store and they're making purchases. So that I think that's an example of those two kind of buckets.
Introducing the Crowdfunding Nerds Pledge Manager. Powered by Hive Interactive, our Pledge Manager has zero setup fees, zero campaign fees, and charges only 2% of your late pledges. It integrates with Hive Interactive, which means that you can get a special deal with your freight and fulfillment through their systems. We have used these systems ourselves for our own board game projects, and we highly recommend them for you as well. Make sure to scan the QR code or check out the links in the description for more. Or visit crowdfundingnerds.com/hive. Back to the show.
That's such a good example. And the whole reason that that I really want to do this podcast is because people will say, well, if all you're doing is running ads on Google and getting lots of sales, then why waste money running ads on Meta that aren't generating the sales? Well, because, idiot, the Meta ads are driving the interest. So why are the Google ads making the sales? Because the drive is coming from somewhere else. Of course, nobody that listens to this podcast is an idiot, but everyone that doesn't is susceptible to this mistake. But now you will not be susceptible to it anymore. You're going to think about what campaign is actually capturing the sales, or the, if you're going toward a Kickstarter Game Found like crowdfunding launch, you're going to capture emails. Maybe that's the best you can do for now, right? And then what is generating the interest that is causing people to subscribe to your email list. One thing that I find when people use like followers as like followers on their Game Found page or Kickstarter page, they don't know what drives those things. They just or they're running ads directly, and that's the only connection they make is, I'm running ads on Meta, my follower count is going up, therefore it must be working, because I don't know what else to say. That's kind of the simplest you can possibly get in order to, like the most direct connection. People often look for direct connections where they're like, I'm spent $100 this month on ads. I got 50 followers on my Kickstarter pre-launch page. So therefore I'm getting followers at about $2 each, because $100, 50 followers, $2 a follower. However, you could have 3/4 of those followers finding you from somewhere else. And so if you're thinking that, oh, well, this is the only reason, you're really missing out. And you could actually be getting followers at $10 each. Is that good or bad? So you want to have a more sophisticated approach to what is generating interest and where are people getting captured, because those two things are oftentimes more than 1 degree separated. So when I run a Meta campaign and I get followers, it doesn't mean that all the followers are coming from that meta campaign. What I need to do as a creator is think, where else will followers come from and how do they behave? So maybe that's what we could get into. But, I guess before we do that, I want to answer my own question. Ways that people typically behave when they think it's going to generate interest and it actually doesn't. The number one way I will call people out for putting a post out on the Crowdfunding Nerds community or some other Facebook group that you're a member of, where you're like, we had a great playtest of this game and it's a 2 to 5 player game of, swashbuckling intrigue, and you can follow it right here. It's like, that is not something that people go to our Facebook group to talk about. We don't want to be sold to, but even though we are consumers and we love to buy, I have, hundreds of games on my shelf. I buy things that are in the game space, and but the way that people engage in groups, they have commission breath is what they call it in sales. Like a car salesman at a new car lot, they want to sell, or a used car lot, they want to sell you a car. You're on the lot and they're going to try to sell you a car. So you can just tell that everything they're going to do, they're not going to tell you anything bad about that car. They're not going to tell you anything that, oh, well, Nissan's better for this. If you wanted more seats, then, the Nissan has one more seat, or the Toyota is better for this or that. They're going to be like, no, the best of the best is this particular, if you're at a Honda dealership and you want a van, the Honda Odyssey is the best you can get. It's also the only one we sell. But I'm not going to tell you that, even though the Toyota Sienna might have more trunk space, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to talk about how great the trunk space is for the Honda Odyssey, and that's just the way it is. So
you got some experience doing this, Andrew.
Much experience, much. If you ever want to buy like a vehicle with 9 or more passengers, I am an expert in doing that. So, but yeah, so you want to avoid commission breath, where you just want to make a sale and you don't care about the person. You just, that's the perception is, if you try to sell really hard, it's just like, you don't care about me. You just care about my money, right? So
it's not having any kind of social awareness.
Yeah. So don't be spamming Facebook groups with your stuff. Think about how those people behave in that group, or Reddit. Reddit's actually really good at like kicking people out that aren't regulars there. In whatever subreddit, it's they can be very toxic to outsiders. Has a real reputation for that. But that's because outsiders want to come in and monetize the group of people that congregate there.
Challenge the orthodoxy.
Yeah, or challenge the orthodoxy. So I can tell you have
no heretics in our cult.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to come in and understand the culture, and that is difficult to do if you're like, well, but Andrew, there are 15 good Facebook groups and subreddits and whatever. Like, pick 2. Just pick 2 and farm them. I'm talking about the difference between hunting and farming. Hunting is like the hunter goes out into the forest and shoots a deer and is like, we got dinner tonight. The farmer works over the course of the year cultivating the land and planting seeds when the time is right, and watering the seeds to get the things to grow, and harvesting when the time is right. A harvest can be extremely plentiful if you do it right. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't need to worry about, anything related to marketing, but now all of a sudden I'm 1 week from going live on Kickstarter. So now I'm going to spam every Facebook group I get with the same copy pasted, same image. Just hopefully, I'm just throwing a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's not what you want to do at all.
So in terms of interest and driving interest, and then when to catch, because we've said when not to do it. Let's talk about when you should do it. One good time to sort of retarget is the beginning and end of the month, because this sort of overlaps with people's pay periods, and I think people have a tendency to spend differently when they've just been paid.
Yeah.
So you can sort of leverage this, and you can sort of maybe make your announcements for sales, maybe send an email out at the end of the month or the beginning of the month, or you do your retargeting so that it happens at the beginning or the end of the month. Those are kind of pressure points. In fact, in all of our e-commerce accounts, I have a sort of a 2-week cool off period where I don't show that person ads, but then after 2 weeks I show them a different ad from one of our clients, and it's for this very reason. So hopefully you're kind of getting close to another pay period, or they are at a pay period. You can then introduce a new product, a new ad for them to consider.
That's a really good point.
So that's unintentionally, and I think that's when, if you are maybe thinking of launching your Kickstarter, or you're making an email where you're trying to get sales, doing it near the end or the beginning of the month is probably a better place to do it than in the middle of the month.
Yeah, and also, it can inform the way that if you're running retargeting, every day, to just recognize that your numbers are going to look better around the beginning of the month, maybe right in the middle if people get paid on the 1st and the 15th, or like the 5th and the 20th, like our company. People will be generally much more responsive around that time, even for projects. And you might be saying, but Andrew, Kickstarter doesn't collect and GameFound doesn't collect your money until after the campaign concludes. It's like, yeah, that's true, but people don't behave that way. They're not like, oh, I'm just going to spend money I don't have on something that's not going to charge me yet. They still think I've got to put my credit card in. I'm spending money, even though the credit card is not getting charged yet. It's a very important thing to just remember. Customer behavior isn't fully changing for crowdfunding. This is how it works for Amazon. This is how it works when you buy something off Shopify or whatever, right? So consumer behavior is very, very influenced by this. So okay, so we have drivers, we have captures, and then we have or catchers, and then we have something in the middle, which is engagement. So when something drives interest, it's like one campaign, a Facebook ad, let's say. It's a very good driver of interest. YouTube videos can be a very good driver of interest. I would say conventions can be a very good driver of interest. These are 3 of the top ways in the board game industry that you can drive interest, but generally across industries overall. So ads and whatnot, but it's in particular on Meta. You can also drive interest organically. This is very powerful for example, if somebody's looking for ChatGPT, something on ChatGPT, organic ChatGPT is very powerful. So when you have a good website that says all the right things for about your game, ChatGPT will pick it up, and then it may actually be included. If your game wins awards, if your game has good reviews, all of that can really help. But what drives interest, the main things generally would be things that you put your time or money into are going to drive interest. Now, to capture interest, I would say primarily, let's talk about that last, because right in the middle, you have this engagement. And I think there are a couple of things that are extremely critical to have in place, because you want to give people a place to go research. So if people are now interested because the driver has, hit them between the eyes and now they're on your landing page, you want them to have a place to go research. And if they just do it on their own, they might Google it or do chat or search on ChatGPT or ask a friend. But if your game is not well known, your website might not even be indexed by ChatGPT yet. ChatGPT may say, oh, I don't know much about this product. Here are 10 others. So you want to really give them a place to go. So that's why kind of that virtuous cycle system is so important. You need to get them on your email list. You need to get them to read your landing page. You need to give them more information. And this is the missing connection for everybody listening to this podcast: your social media, your groups. You need to bring them into your tribe. And so the tribe would be on like Discord or your Facebook group. Your community is the word we always use. It's like the virtuous cycle word. So when you bring somebody into your community, the definition of a community for us is somebody that is someplace that people can talk to you, you can talk to them, and they can talk to each other without you. So if they have questions about the rules or questions about whatever, or they just want to talk about the weather, they can do that in your community. So communities generally for us are like Discord, like a Discord server, a Facebook group. A YouTube channel can work because people can talk and they can feel heard. It's like people can get real social in those comments. Like a subreddit can be okay, but typically if there's not like a thriving community of people that play regularly, it's not really going to be very active. But Discord, you can get people in that are just learning about this and ask questions. Excited fans can answer, and you can answer, and that's a great place for people to go to get information. So when you get them to subscribe to your email list, you should absolutely be leading them into your community. Number one thing you should be doing. And the community can give them places to go for, to kind of promote that engagement, where they're looking for reasons to back your product, or they're looking for things to learn. They're looking to learn about your product. They're looking for resources to learn about your product. So another element of engagement is having content out there on the internet. I think this is one of the most undervalued, under-considered elements of this whole process. You need to make sure that you send your games to reviewers and previewers so that people have places to go, to like videos to find. Like they'll find videos after the fact, so in some cases many years after the fact, and they'll research. I mean, I've had people that I did a video on games that inspired me for my original design, and it was like, RPGs like Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy Tactics and whatever, and people will still to this day, every so often I'll get somebody commenting on a video like that, and where they just discovered Deliverance like this week. So it's an important thing to have that content out there as resources that people can find, right? Anything else you can think of that you think people really need to have in order to promote engagement before, after somebody's become interested, but before they purchased? What are other things people can do?
Well, something that people should consider is what I will term leeching engagement.
Uh-huh.
So I believe one reason why World of Warcraft was so popular was because of the Lord of the Rings films. Those are a high fantasy theme. Everyone had those very popular films, and then now a video game comes out where you could basically play Lord of the Rings as a computer game. So that was like Blizzard leeching on a kind of cultural phenomenon that done really well and leveraging it for their business. Another example of this is that when the Cyberpunk trading card game was just blowing up, now we run ads for the publisher of Cyberpunk for their role-playing game, which is the original, and we completely kind of leached off that hype, and we were able to make a lot of sales through that. So you might find that in the kind of cultural zeitgeist, there's maybe a certain theme or a certain game that's sort of trending, and if you have a product that can sort of align itself, almost like those little fish that swim next to the bigger fish in like the ocean, if you can kind of align yourself, then you can sort of leech their engagement and kind of direct folks towards your thing. So obviously you need to do this tastefully. I wouldn't suggest like on somebody's ad like posting your games like my game's better, buy mine. But you certainly can kind of leverage what is exciting people. And a lot of game designers do exactly this. They'll find like Wingspan is a very popular game, so they'll create some type of nature game or some type of bird game that's very similar to the
Nestlings
kind of themes
that we marketed a long time ago.
Yeah, so there's
like
lots of
themed game.
a lot of examples of publishers doing this, and I think that's a smart move. But you can also do it kind of broadly with your marketing efforts. If you know that, for example, Avatar, Paramount just released a film for Avatar. That's something that we're leveraging because we run ads for the Avatar role playing game. And so that's something that we can kind of capitalize on. We can target people who have interest in Paramount and Netflix, and then we can, direct them with, hey, continue the adventure at home or whatever. And that's a way where we can kind of leverage. We also did this with June when that June film came up. We also sell products around June. So we can then, say, hey, by the way, there's other June thing here. So that's now obviously those are big IPs for franchises. But nevertheless, if you've got a game that's heavily inspired by June or something that's very kind of inspired by Avatar, The Legend of Aang or whatever, you can certainly do the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sharing your inspirations are really helpful. Kind of more diffused, but going back to the video that I made about what games inspired me when I created this, what aspects of Final Fantasy Tactics did I bring into my game that I really enjoyed? What game, how did World of Warcraft influence me? How did StarCraft and Warcraft 3 and Diablo influence me as big Blizzard games? And those types of things are things that people will say, I'm familiar with those games, not familiar with yours, but I really like the grid-based system in Final Fantasy Tactics too. That's cool that you use your targeting system like that. A lot of games do in the board game space. Or like super specific character customization from League of Legends. Every character in League has a sort of a kit that makes them do something well, and that is something that served as inspiration for my game. And so people are like, well, I know about League of Legends and I kind of like that. That sounds very attractive. And so what I'm doing is I'm using something that we both understand and finding common ground using an example of that we can both resonate with. So I think that's super valuable. The shortcut to doing this is using an IP. That's why so many IPs are out there, because people are like, well, I like Dune, but I've never heard of the 2D20 system or whatever from Modifius. But Modifius has a Dune RPG. That sounds awesome. I'd love to get into Frank Herbert's world and dominate Arrakis and, whatever. I don't know exactly how. Right. Yeah. So I think that those things are super, super valuable. But yeah, giving people, you don't need to like copy, like Temtem, for example, is the Pokemon MMO. And they straight up say, like, we were inspired by Pokemon, but Pokemon didn't have an MMO. So Temtem became the thing, and it got pretty popular, and it's just a total knockoff.
We need a 2D Pokemon MMO. What are they doing? Come on.
Yeah. Well, I think that the idea is that you don't have to be like copycat or knockoff and say our game is like this. One other thing I want to say that you shouldn't do is you should not give people like, we're like, Gloomhaven plus Wingspan, but better. It's like, well, Gloomhaven and Wingspan are extremely popular. What makes you think your game is better? It's probably worse in 100 ways and better in 2 ways, Yeah. So don't give comparisons that disparage the original product, but give comparisons that honor the original product, please. So now I'll say one other thing is, well, I have 2 other things: cannibalization that I want to talk about, and captures. So first of all, what are captures? So things that actually capture the results of the interest you generate that actually show sales. So number 1, I mean, very obvious, but your e-commerce store. Like if you make sales, you're capturing interest from somewhere, right? Your email marketing system, you're capturing interest whenever you or you're capturing the result of the interest you generate with your drivers with your email marketing system. Your retargeting is probably the best example of this, where the first time I send out a Facebook ad, maybe it costs $20 to make a sale, but then the remarketing will be like half that amount, $10 to make a sale. So remarketing a lot of the time, or retargeting, will be sometimes like half of my budget. Like when a Kickstarter's live, I want all the people who saw it to see it again. And the remarketing is where we make like, sometimes more than half of all our backers, just because all the people who have heard of it now get it. What are other things you can think of that capture interest? Like other marketing things, or are those the main ones?
I think those are the main ones.
Yeah.
Maybe like a live stream where, anything that's kind of like time sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Sales are a great way to capture. You can retarget a lot of people who've been to a store and it's like, oh, now everything's 20% off. A lot of people can re-engage with your products and services at that point. So the sales can often be a great way to kind of leverage captures.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one. Also, I'll say that people on your email list, I believe, and in fact, I want to say the crowdfunding space is the only industry that people actually debate this that I've ever been involved in. But, because people are like, I'll just use followers. But the email list is the most valuable asset that you will have as a company. Just by and large, that's one of the most valuable assets that you'll have. So if you don't build an email list, you're shooting your future self in the foot. But the idea is that I get an email list. So like for Deliverance, I had 6,000 people by the time we launched on Kickstarter. Maybe no, it was 4,400 or so, and we had $60,000 come out of those emails. It was about 120,000 come out of all of those emails, and for our first Kickstarter campaign. Then we actually released the product. We made sales. Every single email we sent, we made sales. Our email list grew to about 6,000 before the next Kickstarter campaign, but we had sold out of all of our 5,000 unit stock with add-ons and whatever. And those 6,000 people that were on our email list, a ton of them came in back the next campaign. I'd say about a third of our $500,000 that we raised on Kickstarter came from people that were already on our email list that had subscribed. About a third came from our existing fan base. So now we have just around 11,000 people on our email list. And as we go toward our next Kickstarter, this kind of captive audience that has, let's say the first 4,400 emails that back that very first Deliverance Kickstarter for an average of $117, or it's like $116 up an average pledge. Those people have backed multiple titles. Some of them have purchased multiple times from the store. Others that didn't back the Kickstarter ended up buying the product or ended up going all in the expansion. So those types of things, you may not see results from capturing right away, but if you're diligently keeping people updated and, getting people to open your emails and whatnot, that email list is going to really, really work for you. It's going to be eventually a heavy driver of interest too. So, because whatever you share in your email list, people will go find and they'll go read, they'll go see. So, whatever call to action you have, people will click on that button, right? So, I think it's one of the reasons that Deliverance was able to get nominated for 5 Board Game Geek, or what is it called? The BGG Awards, Golden Geeks. We were nominated for 5 of them partially because of our awareness campaign that we just sent an email out in whatever it was, May of 2023 or 2024, and let people know this is happening. And all the Deliverance fans are on our email list, so of course the ones that use BGG are gonna vote, and so that was very helpful.
I think people,
I'm sure,
sort of underestimate the kind of, you have a lot of pretty dedicated Deliverance fans, and you might not be the biggest fish out there. And I think some people are surprised when some of these things happen, because there's suddenly out of nowhere, it seems that, Deliverance is kind of, trending. Well, that's because you have a very dedicated group of fans that when you do say, hey, there's this competition happening, or look at this, then people feel inclined to go and check it out. So
right,
that's it shows you the power of like your fans and the audience when you can build that up.
Right. I think it's super duper valuable to make sure that you spend a lot of effort cultivating your group of fans, because if you do that, they will appreciate you, they'll follow you, they'll back projects that you make, not necessarily just because it's a great game that they don't have on their shelf that they really want, but it's also the designer I really like or the company that I really like made this. It's another reason that they're going to jump on your product instead of someone else's, right? So I think it's super important. Deliverance is just one example. There are many other companies out there that do a really great job with their fans, and so small but mighty companies. And like Galactic Cruise does such a great job. Kinson Key Games, they've got one game with like one Kickstarter expansion, and they have a ton of fans that are all very engaged and all that. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about is cannibalization. this is a term, obviously cannibal is someone who eats someone else, and you shouldn't do that. Cannibalization is the idea that you're already earning a certain amount. We'll just say for now, you're earning a certain amount of traffic. And when you pay money for ads to run, let's say I'm earning a certain amount of organic ChatGPT traffic. Now I'm paying ads roughly, it's an average of like $15 a day that we're actually spending because of our budget and everything. So the amount we're willing to pay per click. So instead of organically people seeing my stuff and clicking, they actually are charging me $1 for that same person that I may have received anyway. That's one of my concerns with ChatGPT, is that I'm, for certain searches, deliverance is going to be like the number one thing. So when I'm running ads also, I'm kind of spending money for something that I would get anyway. I'll give you an even better example. Something that I totally just lost money on until I stopped doing it. I put, this was when Deliverance was released. I put 120 units in Amazon warehouses in the US, so that some people will just be like, oh, I hear about this product. I only shop on Amazon. So they look for the product on Amazon. Well, I was running ads, all sorts of ads for, keyword driven ads for, Christian board games and board game, dungeon crawl board games and skirmish board games and all of that. And the only sales that I would make were phrases that used the word deliverance. So it was like Deliverance board game, the Deliverance board game. I made tons of sales by paying money to Amazon for sponsored ads. So I'm like, why am I doing this? The only sales that I'm making are for my branded keywords. So I pulled all of the ad spend that I was spending, and my sales did not drop one bit. Like, oh my goodness, I was just wasting money on Amazon because everyone that wanted deliverance was finding it, and I wasn't. The product is very expensive, so it's $100 product. So, trying to get people to find something on Amazon for the first time and buy it for $100 is like not really great, right? So if I had a $50 product or a $40 product, it's a lot easier to do on Amazon. But that's another podcast episode. In fact, we've recorded podcast episodes on Amazon in the past. So the idea behind cannibalization, just make sure, one of the biggest ways you can cannibalize is you spend all this time, and this is something that I don't want to call out any particular company, but everybody that does commission-based sales. So what do we call that? Yes, performance-based marketing. So when you hire a company that does performance-based marketing, so there are lots of companies that do this, Gelop and Backer Kid and whatever, they all do performance-based marketing. When you hire them and run ads on the first day of your crowdfunding campaign, they will reach people that you would have reached otherwise because their ads are showing up and whatever. You would send an email to your people, you run your own ads, you do whatever. Your organic, your fans talk to each other, your Discord server has a notification that your campaign is live. Well, your fans are going to arrive at various times of the day. They might not all see that email right at the beginning of the day. I mean, over the next 12 hours, you're going to get lots of opens of your emails. And what will happen is with performance-based marketing, maybe they log onto social media before they open their emails, or maybe they just don't see the email and they log on social media, but they would have backed because they're like, oh yeah, that's right. It's the campaign launched this week. The performance-based marketing has such a high return on ad spend early on in the first 2 to 4 days of a campaign, and oftentimes such a low return after that. That's because a lot of the time performance-based marketing companies will cannibalize a section of those people that are ready to buy your product that you have put in the hard work and diligent effort to cultivate and that are ready to back. But of course, they see an ad, there's like, okay, there it is, I'm clicking it and going. And you're going to have to pay 15% commission for that sale. That's one of the most frustrating. And of course, the amount that they per click and whatever. So that is something that can be really frustrating. That is a great example of cannibalization. So if you're running with a performance-based marketing company, I'm not saying it's bad. I've used them in the past and may use them in the future, but make sure that you are not doing that right when you launch. Make sure that your people back first, and then use performance-based marketing if you want to, for as a driver in the middle of the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want to use performance-based marketing as a capture tactic, please. So, any other thoughts?
No, I think that's it's good to keep in mind. Maybe one other thing, just in terms of cannibalization. I mentioned earlier that we run ads for a publisher based on their publisher name, but we spend a relatively small amount doing that in terms of the overall budget. And this is just more so that we don't have competitors jumping in that spot. So, so we are kind of sort of cannibalizing, but it's done intentionally because we know that there's competitors who could jump in that spot. We know when someone searches as publisher, we don't want a competitor to be in that kind of promotion slot. So we want to make sure that we're there. So it's done. It is a form of cannibalization, but it's done with intention, and we have a limited budget on how much we spend on it.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a really good point. I'll riff on that for a second, because when let's just say you get 50% of all the traffic, just keep numbers real simple. You get 50% of all the traffic that goes to Google. In fact, actually the more realistic numbers are about 40% of all the traffic that goes to Google will oftentimes click on the first ranking in organic. So if you're organic ranking, they scroll down past the ads and they'll click on, the number one ranking or the number one listing, as long as it is relevant. So that's being ranked organically. You get 40% of all the listings. So then if you run an ad for your branded name, which is something I've done with major companies in the past, we did this all the time, but you might get 60% of all the clicks that go to that search for that query. That's a huge increase, 50% increase in the number of clicks that you're getting of all the searches that go there. But you're paying for, let's say it goes up by 20%, but you're now paying for, let's say, out of that 60% slice, I'm using numbers, not percentages of the percentage of the 60% slice, 40% used to be organic, but now of the 60% slice, you've got 35% is organic and 25% is actually paying per click. So your numbers are straight up increasing. However, you are cannibalizing that 5% that would have been organic anyway. So the question is the cannibalization worth it? And yeah, if you're getting 20% more clicks than you were before, and you're having to kind of spend 5% of your clicks in order to generate that, it's going to result in a lot more money in than otherwise, right? So something to think about. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode on drivers and catchers and a little bit about ChatGPT and how the ads are working. I'll keep you guys updated on ChatGPT shenanigans as time goes on. When we get referral tracking in and whatnot, we'll revisit that. But, if you're listening online, give us a like, or if on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe. If you're listening on audio, please give us a 5-star and, leave a comment. And if you are just a human, you should download tabletone.app because they're sponsoring our podcast and we need to say their name. All right, guys, we will chat you up later. See you on the next time, nerds. See you on the next time. See you next time, nerds. See you on the next time.
See you on the next time.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you.